This piece that you're about to see is based on a field study I published many years ago. I explored 3 teachers' thinking about the relationship between pleasure and education: a female 8th grade honors English teacher, a male 8th grade honors English teacher, and a 2nd grade woman teacher, female teacher. The study was a cultural model study in which, through natural language production within an interview setting and observations in the classroom, the person's discourse is analyzed as a particular representation of the person's mind, using schema theory as the organizing frame for the models side of the study. These models are not merely personal, they are cultural, shared schemas, learned within a particular cultural context. In this work, images of people's cultural minds emerge, which are the individual person distilled through what Bourdieu terms habitus. I discovered several dimensions of the teachers and their thinking. First, there seemed at the time a clear gender divide between the women and the man. Both women were unable to connect pleasure and education. The man easily made this connection. As it turned out, through the cultural models analysis, it became clear that for the women, pleasure was a private, sensuous, quiet affair focused on connection with others. For the man, pleasure was a public mind, intellectual affair, especially focused through engagement with the wrangle of ideas, whether in his classroom or on the radio show that he hosted earlier in his life. Small wonder the women were unable to connect pleasure and education. Education as practiced is a public and mind affair with no concern for connections between people and bodies. Their pleasure could not be connected to education. Additionally, the 8th grade honors teacher expressed her concern that were education to get a hold of pleasure, it would surely destroy it. For her, they needed to be kept well apart for the sake of pleasure. Second, all 3 teachers focused their thinking through chairs. The 2nd grade female teacher noted a most pleasurable experience as sitting with her 2 daughters in an oversized easy chair on a rainy afternoon, or reading quietly hours on end in that self-same chair. The 8th grade female honors English teacher envisioned pleasure as driving in a convertible on a highway in the mountains with the top down and her hair blowing in the wind, or preparing food for friends invited into her home, sitting and eating and chatting. The male 8th grade English teacher pictured pleasure as sitting on his stool at the head of the class and engaging in his idea wrangle, pointing from one person to another to speak, and he speaking back, he orchestrating the whole. These then are 2 elements of the study which for me presented the possibility of making art. I want to make one thing perfectly clear here. This work you're about to see is not an illustration of the field study. It is a re-examination of the data through a new means, and things are discovered that in my estimation were not discoverable in any other way. So the work. This is the way this feels. I'm walking and thinking about doing this project, and I'm thinking about my plan to do a chair dance. There have been so many chair dances, but what am I going to do? I think about the teacher who loved her corner of the library, and about the library experience of the teacher who became a teacher through it. For them, the hidden corners of the world, out of sight, are the places in which their lives are found, felt, become real. I'm thinking about the male teacher who perches on his stool at the front of the room and orchestrates, conducts the conversation in his class. For him, the public space is his world. That is where he finds himself. This title you are about to hear, it references the chairs of these women and privacy that felt important to the women, the libraries in which they found themselves, the man perched on his stool calling on students from on high, and my distinction in the published study between the man's love of public pleasure, the wrangle of ideas, and the private pleasure of the mother in her chair, and the other teacher picturing herself alone, driving with the top down alone. And I knew the French. Why the French? I don't know. Trois chaises, ont la paix et ont la guerre. Deux libraires, la féminine et le masculine, l'ancien monde de Rancière. The arched crown of the Palo Verde hovers huge, bursting a multitude of nested yellow-green fireworks, a firmament of thousands glowing in the late afternoon sun. It spreads its glinting protection over what I dream. This Palo Verde, unabated, grows into majestic efflorescence of feathery light, larger than it ought be. My wife says, needs thinning, too large, not healthy, fragile and weak despite the girth of its trunks. She's right, of course, but I dream with this tree. Of what do I dream when I think of the Palo Verde? Not of death, not of health, but of lying akimbo in the chaise under the weeping willow of my youth. Long, languid hours in the summer heat, made somewhat cool by the thin veiled shade, hour upon hour, reading, sleeping, dreaming. I float in that chaise. Day after day, always in the afternoon, long afternoons. I love this Palo Verde, moving, floating where I live under that tree. I live not there, but in my dreams it brings to me. I sit in my chair in my bedroom, gazing out the glass door, the green of the elm alley becoming another place in the early morning light. I think of one of my favorite childhood books, Wind in the Willows. The low sun, the almost glowing leaves, the glistening green grass all infused with lavender light. This the dream I am brought to of a morning. The women sit in their chairs, one bundled with her daughters, floating in the feeling of what seems the intimacy of reality. The other flies down the highway, free, gleaming with a bursting heart, and sits in her warm hearth home, holding close, sharing food, the slowly turning stuff of intimacy. For both these, chairs the refuge from the wordiness of the world in which they labor, the place of true reality, not the headiness of noise and bustle. But really, are they any more real here than there? Do they not dream in those chairs of other lives, other places, futures as well as presents? Is there any place in the world where we do not simultaneously occupy a materially real space and a dream? The master was a stick. It tap, tap, tapped the desk of the learner. It tap, 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 tapped the learner. Its oakness, bamboo heart, walnut, and ebony obdurate length, never mind its material life, as it tap, tap, tapped the rhythm of the learner. The male teacher sits on high before his students, orchestrating their talk. Not conversation, no, never conversation, although he thinks he converses and wrangles and shares. No, he calls out. He demands the account of one's mind. We think him an ogre, demanding, thrilling at the kill of the idea, the joy of the joust, the argument, willing to die himself. In the cause of what? But he sees himself in a different light. He sees himself in a different way, above in the cool air, en majeste, lofting and loving among the thoughts. Yes, he attacks, but only this because there's no honor in this dross world. His word is not his to keep. There are others who would dishonor what he knows, and so he must fight. But don't see him as fighting in his better nature. See him as a loving, basking, almost sensuous in his love of the idea. Sensuous, yes. Feel in his body the lithesome notes of some other world in which he and we can float and love. In this, does he dream any less or any more than the women in their chairs? Is there some place in the world that is not always a dream?